And a hello to everyone. I'm Mike Martinego of SportMedBC. We're so glad you could join us here for our fourth SportSmart webinar. And our webinar today, it's on foot and ankle injuries. If you're active, really, I'm sure it's something that has affected you at some point of your playing career, sports, running, whatever the activity. Foot and ankle problems can always hamper us. So here we are for SportSmart webinar number 4. Just some background on the SportSmart program, as it's an injury prevention and performance initiative put together by SportMedBC and funded through the Public Health Agency of Canada's Active and Safe grant. We've conducted workshops all across British Columbia. It started up in late August of 2012 and now into nearly March of 2013. We've also provided plenty of resources, tips and tools, videos through our free safety network at sportmedbc.com. We will be getting into our fourth webinar of the program titled Best Practices, Footwear and Ankle Injuries very, very shortly. Just before I throw it over to our sports safety coordinator and presenter, Seb Hartell, I do want to mention if you have any questions or comments, any feedback really, we'll try our best to answer to it throughout the webinar. There's a toolbar on the right-hand side, as I'm sure you can see there on your screen, that allows you to send us questions and comments throughout. As well, this webinar will be posted in our safety network and our YouTube channel. SportMedBC is the YouTube channel, within the next 48 hours or so. So be sure to sign up for the free network and check out the webinar again if you might have missed anything. But for now, I'll pass it over to SportMedBC Safety Coordinator Seb Hartell, and he will take us through best practices, foot and ankle injuries.
All right, good evening, everyone, and thanks again for attending our fourth webinar here. I'm very excited to talk about this topic, as it is one that I'm approached very often about, and it is very common in sports. So let's just jump right into it. And tonight what we're going to talk about is really 3 common types of foot and ankle injuries. And so that would be plantar fasciitis, Shin Splints, and Achilles Tendinitis. These are very common in running and jumping sports, especially in track and field and long distance running, soccer, volleyball, combat sports, dance, ballet, just to name a few. Many other sports do get involved with these as well, though. So if your sport isn't on that list, do not worry. It is something that is still possible in other sports. The agenda for tonight is we're going to review each of those injuries, and for each one of those we'll go over the signs or symptoms, the causes, some different management strategies for each of them, and then we'll also go over some stretches and exercises that can help with alleviating the signs or symptoms. We'll also go over certain training considerations, and then we'll review back some more information that's available on our Sports Safety Network. So plantar fasciitis, first of all, it involves the plantar fascia, which is a thick connective tissue that passes underneath the foot and acts as a support to the arch of the foot. It runs from the heel and the metatarsal bones, it runs from the heel all the way to the metatarsal bones here, as you can see on the picture. And it really gives into plantar fasciitis, which is an irritation or inflammation of that plantar fascia tissue. In this next picture here, we can see a little bit more detailed into where you can get that irritation up along the foot. Some signs or symptoms of plantar fasciitis, it would include pain at that heel, especially right where you get that tearing there is more the more common area. And then you get some pain, especially in that first step of the morning. And the reason why that happens is that pain's excruciating, or it's at its worst in that first step, because let's say you've been sleeping for a full night, that 8 hours. Your feet are relaxed, you sleep, you relax, and all of a sudden your feet kind of relax and go into that nice contracted position. That tissue's relaxed for that whole night, and then you get up and all of a sudden put your whole weight down. So for me, let's say 185 pounds down on this foot, and that really stretches that tissue all of a sudden pretty rapidly. That can be pretty painful. After that, it tends to get a little bit better as you warm up and get moving throughout the day, but then afterwards, as you start to increase that activity, it's quite normal to have that post-activity ache, especially along the arch. Some causes for plantar fascia or plantar fasciitis would include having high or low arches in your feet combined with improper footwear. So if you have high arches, having footwear that doesn't support a high arch can set you up for potential injury. having tight calves, hamstrings, or glute muscles. So that whole muscle chain throughout the posterior, the back of the leg, can help pull onto that, help cause some dysfunction in the foot. Also having some foot muscle weakness. There's a lot of intrinsic muscles in the feet, and so they tend to tire out pretty quickly, and so if they are weak, then you do get a lot of extra movement in the foot and a lot of laxity, which puts a lot of pressure and stress onto your plantar fascia. And then also some improper training techniques, such as doing too much too soon, just poor technique in terms of, poor running techniques, poor jumping techniques, especially in track and field, can go a long way into developing this condition. Some management techniques include obviously icing after, especially once you do have that inflammation or irritation, icing after activity. I would say, let's say even once you have it for 15-20 minutes of ice on the heel or the area of pain for 15-20 minutes after activity should suffice. If you require more later on the night, I'd wait at least 2 hours before you start icing again. Pain-free massaging or rolling. We'll go into rolling a little bit more specifically on the next slide here. Taping and orthotics, you can kind of see a couple different taping techniques that they have there on the right of the screen. Some stretching and strengthening, which we'll go over, and then also just having proper footwear for your sport and the demand. You really want to have a footwear that matches your foot and also the demand of your sport. So, let's say you have proper soccer boots, for Adidas versus Nike. Some of them might have higher large arches, a little less arch support on one versus the other, so something to consider. Some of these stretches here or the stretches on the screen here will help definitely with some plantar fasciitis. And so here in this picture, on the upper left one, we have the stretching of the plantar fascia tissue itself. Indirectly, the next picture over here, it's a passive stretch of the calf muscles, and just more generic or generally speaking. And then for the calf muscles, there is a way to get a little bit more specific here. And you do have two sets of calf muscles, and you have your big gastrocnemius, which is the big one on top, the big visual one or visible one, and that's how you would stretch it with this picture up above on the top right, using a straight leg, getting that nice stretch and feeling it throughout the muscle. You also do want to target specifically the soleus muscle, and that's one that passes underneath the gastrocs. That's a little bit deeper and harder to get to, and so a great way to do that is to actually bend that back leg towards the wall and then lean into it. So that's another great way. There's also a picture here with the tennis or the golf ball under the foot, and so if it's just a general, or early on, I would go maybe a little bit more less specific with a tennis ball, but you can roll your foot over that and get that massage, especially if you don't have a partner who's willing to touch your feet and rub your feet down every night. Maybe this might be a little bit more convenient, and you can actually control a little bit better the pressure that you're putting on there. So a tennis ball would suffice, or maybe even more specifically a golf ball if it's a pretty accurate location. So if you do have a lot of tightness in there, maybe it helps stretching out that arch with the tennis or a golf ball. So for some strengthening exercises for the arch of the foot, it's a kind of tricky place to get to, but there's a couple exercises that I really, really enjoy, and I actually prescribe this to any client I ever see or anybody I know who has this issue. And so the first one would be towel curls. And so if you look down here on the screen on the bottom left, what you would actually do is place your foot right on top of a towel and actually curl it up with the bottom of your foot and your toes. Once you're done, stretch it back out, do a couple sets of that, and what I actually do is if that once that gets too easy, I'll even put like a can of soup or something at the end of the towel just to increase the weight and the resistance, but you don't want to do too much. At the bottom right here, we also have some marbles or some other little bells, things that you could pick up. And so what you would actually do is, let's say it's a marble jar, you empty the jar out on the ground, and you actually pick up all the marbles and put them back in with your toes. And so this is, again, it's kind of like doing a bicep curl for your feet, and this really helps into building up that strength and endurance in your foot muscles. At the top there, I also have what I call the towel walk, and so I would actually curl the feet up, or wrap the towel up and slowly walk across, maintaining balance through it the whole time on top of that towel, and so that helps really build up the endurance, the balance, and kind of the strength into your foot. For these exercises, I'd only do these really a couple times a week. I wouldn't suggest more than that, because if you do too much, then you don't want to tire the foot out, because that would just lead to more problems. So again, you slowly want to build this up, so you don't want to radically change this. 2-3 times a week tops is a good way to go. Moving on next is to shin splints, and so shin splints is a pretty generic term that they just describe for any kind of shin pain in terms, especially with athletes. More commonly referred to as medial tibial stress syndrome, and what that is it refers to an overuse injury that refers to exercise-induced pain on the inside or the outer border of the shin bone, which is also referred to as your tibia. A couple causes for this, again, very similar to the other injury, is overuse, running a lot on hard surfaces, doing a lot of uphill or downhill running, also having improper footwear, and also maybe even doing too much too soon. So let's say you've had an off season where you haven't been all that active, all of a sudden getting up and doing 5 or 10K a day, doing too much and just keep going every day and pushing it, and then on top of this running, you're also going to, let's say, soccer practice 4 days a week or whatever it might be, just doing too much too soon and not giving your feet the chance to adjust and your muscles to a chance to adjust to the stress. So just here is a more specific look at some of the muscles that can be affected by shin splints. And so more specifically, you have the tibialis anterior here in the front of the shin. And so this is kind of that big muscle that you would feel along the front outer border of the shin. And then you also have more deeply the tibialis posterior, which you kind of feel more along the back outside lateral portion of your leg, and so the lower leg. So this is more on the posterior side, but those are two different muscles that will be affected by shin splints. So management strategies for shin splints would be, if you start to feel pain along those two muscles or along any part of the shin, first thing is rest. And so it means that you're doing too much and your body needs to rest and catch up. So definitely reduce the activity. Throw some ice on there. Again, same parameters as before, 15 to 20 minutes for every 2 hours after activity, or at least, wait 2 hours in between each time. Also, if you're doing, let's say, a lot of running, maybe consider switching to some pain-free or some resistance-free exercises such as swimming or cycling. Maybe get yourself some shock absorptive insoles. Excuse me about that. Get some cushioning insoles for your feet. Again, proper footwear is a big one on this one again. And then as well as that calf stretching. So those two exercises I mentioned before in that previous slide about getting the gastrocs and the soleus, definitely very important. There are also some taping techniques that you can do to help, again, illustrated on the right side of the screen here. And so we do have the Kinesio taping at the top and then the regular athletic taping at the bottom. Videos will be available on our Sports Safety Network to learn how to do that tape job very soon. So in terms of exercise and prevention, there are a few exercises that really go a long way in terms of helping with shin splints, and so you really want to build up those muscles that we identified before. And a couple ways to do this would be toe raises, so leaning back against the wall, having all the weight on your heels, just lifting your toes up off the ground, doing that, let's say 25 to 30 times, and take a little bit of a break and repeat. The next one would be heel walks, and so the same thing, just walking on your heels, keeping your toes pointed up, and extreme dorsiflexion, just doing some walking like that. Lastly, I would go into dorsiflexion jumps, or just to continue along that progression, dorsiflexion jumps, and you can kind of see here in that picture where, again, you're in that initial position where it's just your heels on the ground, toes pointed up, and you're jumping from that position to try and use those muscles to really explode upwards. There's also exercises that you can do with the Thera-Band, and so having a Thera-Band attached to another object, or have it stabilized against something and have it wrapped around your foot, and again going into dorsiflexion, so you have that resisted dorsiflexion that's building up the strength in your feet, is a great exercise as well. So those are a couple tips to help you guys out with any of your shin splints. In terms of stretching, you really want to go and attack those tibialis muscles, and so again, you want to have pain-free stretching, or at least no more than mild discomfort. But on the left here, you have two different techniques to attack those tibialis muscles. Good techniques. Myself personally, I prefer the standing up version on the left. I've tried the one on the right myself. Hasn't worked that great for me, but I've also known many people that's worked phenomenally for. So I definitely try it out. If that one doesn't work for you, just go to the one on the left. Again, just want to remind you guys about keeping those calf muscles tight. And so a lot of people, especially as soon as they start to feel that pain, a lot of the muscles shifts towards those calves, and they do tend to pick up a lot of tension. So really important to keep those gastrocs and soleuses loose. Get rid of all that tension by stretching them out and targeting them specifically with both of those stretches. Lastly, the third one we'll talk about tonight, and that will be Achilles tendinopathy, also commonly referred to as Achilles tendinitis. You know, the Achilles tendon, located here on this picture, where you have, it's that thick band, that thick tendon band that you can actually even feel yourself if you reach down and try and grab onto. It's that big rubber-like cord, or base-like cord, I call it. And that tendon is actually a common attachment to the heel for both your gastrocs and soleus muscle. So they share that, and it's a very tense tendon, and actually at all times, minimum throughout the day, it's at 95% tension. So you can see that a lot of the irritation, or as soon as you get a little bit tightness in your calves, you're starting to pull on that tendon even a little bit more. And at already 95% throughout the whole day, you know, you tend to get a lot of tension in there and a lot of irritation as possible. More specifically into tendinopathy, the type of injury that you're looking at is it really does irritate, or you even get some degeneration, some micro tears into that tendon, again, specifically because of the tightness. So again, some causes that can bring on Achilles tendinopathy. You have your sudden increase in activity. So again, this is someone who, let's say, was just doing some light running, all of a sudden decides to do, instead of 2K, bumps up to 5, 10K a day, going to do too much. Let's say, again, you're switching into, I mean, myself, I had this just around Labor Day. It's because this summer I was playing beach volleyball 4 nights a week. All of a sudden, I switched off over Labor Day and started playing outdoor soccer on turf, floor hockey, and then indoor volleyball. So it was a complete change in surface as well. So for me, I started to develop some Achilles tendinopathy. Luckily, I used the tips that I'm going to present to you guys soon, and it really helped it out. Didn't miss any training time or any playing time. So just a great way to help, you know, these next tips will help you really adapt to that change in activity. Footwear, again, I can't stress this enough, is really important. So finding something that works for your foot, and so what might work for my foot might not be the same for yours. Everyone has an individual foot, very unique and individual. So what works for me might not work for you in terms of footwear. So that's something to consider. Find something that works for you, matches up to your foot correctly. A lot of Achilles tendinopathy actually happens with a lot of running uphill. So as soon as you start doing some running uphill, I mean, in Vancouver specifically, we can look at a lot of people tend to do the BCMC, or a lot of these trails like the grouse grind can definitely develop through there. Common theme through the night, those tight calf muscles tends to affect all three of these injuries, so that's definitely something to consider as well. And again, so the weakness in the foot and calf, and so we've talked about a lot of the foot exercises, but I do want to mention specifically some other ones for the calves. Specifically in terms of Achilles tendinopathy, some symptoms include a gradual onset of pain. So it's not something that will come one day to the next, but this will happen slowly over time. You'll definitely have some tenderness over the area, and so as you can see here, it's highlighted in red. That would be very tender to touch. Can definitely be stiff, especially when you wake up in the morning, and for that same reason as that irritated tendon that's been on, you know, that's on stretch most of the day. As soon as you start to relax while sleeping, tension in the body releases and the muscle relaxes and the tendon relaxes, and then all of a sudden you get up and stand up and you put a lot of pressure, and basically it's like tugging on that elastic. It will really pull, and that tends to get pretty stiff and also painful as well. You may also notice that there's some, if you just glide your fingers up and down the side of the tendon, you may also notice some palpable nodules on the tendon, and so those just represent some of the scar tissue and some of the tearing that's building up, and so that's also an early sign of a rupture. So if you do notice that, it's definitely time to consider some of our management strategies that we'll talk about in the next slide. Inflammation is possible. It isn't quite as obvious and as frequent as in other injuries, let's say an ankle sprain or something, but it is definitely noticeable, or it can be noticeable. And when it is, you really notice, just compare one side to the other, one Achilles tendon to the other, and you can notice a little bit of an increase in size. It does tend to get, it's not very common to have inflammation, but when it is there, you do definitely tend to notice it. So again, in terms of management strategies, again, so rest is one of those things, especially as we noticed in that picture before, how you start to get those micro tears. If you do try and push through it, you can definitely, you leave yourself susceptible to more serious injuries in terms of complete rupture of that tendon, which is a very serious and long-term injury with a very agonizing rehab that no one really wants to go through. Besides that, though, definitely ice again. So here, a good technique here is to just lie down, throw some ice on the back of your ankle, just over the heel and over the tendon. Again, 15 to 20 minutes after exercise. Again, you know, waiting 2 hours between each session. Definitely some pain-free stretching of the calves. So again, because this tendon does attach the calf muscles to the bone, you don't want to stretch through pain. So as long as you want to reduce that tension in the calves without overstretching that tendon. So it is a little bit tricky. Just go till it's pain-free. If not, then I would consider some massage in the calves as well. If you are starting to feel some irritations, I would start to modify my activity again, maybe going towards some swimming or cycling or something that just doesn't put as much pressure on the Achilles tendon. And there are also some taping techniques again here, as you can see, the athletic tape again in the middle, and then on the right, what is becoming more and more popular is the Kinesio tape or K-tape or those types of products. So here are some specific exercises for Achilles tendinopathy, again, because we want to build up those calf muscles, but a lot of the times people just do the simple calf raises like you see here on the left, and those are just straight up and down, keeping the legs straight, and that really does target those big gastroc muscles, which is very common and good to do, but a lot of people do ignore that soleus muscle, and that's where some problems do arise. So here on the right, we do have an exercise that targets specifically the soleus muscle, and so what I want you to just pay attention to is where the circle is there, identifying that you're doing the same thing as a calf raise, but this time with your knee bent, and that isolates the soleus muscle just a little bit more. Great exercise, definitely recommend doing it, and this is a good preventative way to battle Achilles tendinopathy before it even happens. Here are a couple other exercises. So on the left here we have a gentleman sitting in a chair, again doing some seated calf raises with a weight, let's say on his knees. There are those machines at the gym that might target this a little bit more specifically, but you don't need those big machines or need to invest in those. Just get a good weight or whatever you can find. I mean, hey, even throw your kids on there if you need to. Be creative, but get those exercises going, build up that muscle and that endurance. And then again here on the right we have, again, one of my favorite tools would be the Thera-Band, and so here we have specifically going into plantar flexion and really working those muscles of the calves as well. Just in relation to what I was talking about, so I've mentioned footwear quite a few times tonight, and I do get a lot of comments about minimalist shoes, and a lot of people are either firm believers or people stand quite against it in terms of because they do suffer through injuries right away when trying to go through these. And so for me, I always advise if you are to use them, make it a gradual increase. Don't throw away your other pair of shoes and only depend on these solely. So go, let's say build up half an hour at a time. Let's say you're going to start doing a little bit of jogging, maybe jog maybe half an hour at a light pace, gradually increase it. Don't throw away your old shoes. Maybe do 1 day a week and then start to build that up. But you don't want to go all in and just go quit cold turkey with your other shoes, because if you think about it, let's say for me, I've been running around with shoes for the past 25 years, 26 years. My muscles are adapted to that way. So by doing a drastic change, it means it puts a lot of stress under my muscles that aren't, that they're not necessarily used to. So if I do that drastic change, my body's going to play a lot of catch up, and that's where injury tends to happen. There are some injury risks depending on the shoe that you choose, or the minimalist shoe that you choose, or barefoot shoe if you want another word to describe it. Is you do tend to get a lot of metatarsal injuries, which again, those bones right near the toes, because of that landing, these shoes do actually encourage you to land, or they do promote you to land a little bit more on the front or midfoot as you strike down, and so it does tend to put a little bit more pressure on that bone that isn't quite used to it. And then you do also tend to get those injuries mentioned in this webinar. So again, Shin Splints, Achilles Tendinitis, and Plantar Fasciitis all do tend to arrive from wearing shoes like this. So again, those dramatic changes do take time to adapt. So if you are going to try and use this training tool, just do it gradually and do it safely. Another training consideration, so mentioned in terms of stretching, and so there's oftentimes where stretching can only do so much, and so afterwards, one of the big common trends now is to use the foam roller onto your muscles. And what I actually like to do is I use this trick, and instead of going out and buying those big sticks or expensive foam rollers, I actually just grab a water bottle, plastic water bottle, not preference one brand to the other, and I'll actually put that in the freezer in the morning, and when I come back from my training or my game, I'll actually use that as my foam roller, and I'll roll up my muscles of the lower body with that frozen water bottle. So you're getting the effect of the pressure and the massage, as well as the cooling effect of the ice. I do this post-activity, and I'll usually roll over all major muscle groups for 10 to 15 minutes, and so I'll do the bottom of my foot, then I'll go up my calf and across even in the front of my shin, and so I'll either put my body weight on it or I'll put my hands and I'll roll up and down myself. At that point too, you can go up the quads, the hamstrings, adductors, your groin muscles, abductors on the lateral side, and really just work your way up your body, and it's a great tool to have. It's Very, very cheap, and you'll feel great about it. It's been one of the best changes I've done to my training regimen in the past 5 years. So definitely something I suggest big time. It's my pearl of wisdom for the day to you guys. So definitely highly recommended. That being said, just to wrap things up here, proper warm-up and cool-down are key in terms of dealing with these injuries. And so by warming up the muscles, by getting the elasticity in them and building up that, getting the nutrients and their fuel to those muscles and throughout your body, it's a big key to getting ready for those activities. And so it'll really help reduce the risk of injury. Have that active warm-up, running around, doing that dynamic stretching, very important. But can't forget that cool down, and that's where a lot of stress comes from, or a lot of tightness in your muscles is afterwards as well to cool down. If you've been running on turf, let's say a soccer game for 90 minutes, your body's going to start taking a beating, and so the body's natural reaction is to tense up. So by doing that, stretch afterwards, help reduce some of that tension, help increase circulation post-activity. But it's also really important to listen to your body in terms of these injuries, and so you can identify these or catch these pretty early on. If you start to have tension throughout your calves, throughout your, if you start to feel in the Achilles a little bit or in the front, something just doesn't feel right, even under the foot, listen to it. Get some good stretching in there. Maybe start on those exercises before it's too late. You can definitely catch this before they get too advanced. Maybe modify your activity, scale back a couple days. If you notice that your Achilles is a little painful or your plantar fascia is a little painful, maybe take a break from running and switch to another activity for that day. Or even that week, make sure that until it feels better. So again, tackle that injury early, and like I've mentioned tonight a whole bunch of times, you really want to invest in proper footwear. It's really worth it. Find something that works for you specifically. Definitely very important. And then again, so I mentioned a whole bunch of exercises throughout this presentation. The thing is, you don't want to overdo them. And so like we said, it's a gradual increase. Even the exercise I suggested in terms of strengthening the foot, don't go extreme and don't say, okay, I'm starting to get some heel pain or some pain around the foot or ankle. I'm going to go overboard. I'm going to do these ankles to never do this, or I'm going to do these exercises to make sure I never get this pain again. And so definitely don't go too extreme one side or the other where you're doing this all day, every day, 6 times a day. Just keep it to maybe a session each, a couple reps through. And doing that 2-3 times a week at the most, and this way just build it up gradually, build up the endurance and build up that strength. So that being said, we are going to throw over back to Mike, and he'll conclude us with the webinar here. So thanks again for attending, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks. Bye.
All right, thanks again to Seb Hartell for guiding us through all that foot and ankle injuries. Thanks to everyone for tuning in and passing along their thoughts and their comments on this webinar. Again, for various tips and tools, resources, and how to host a workshop, please sign up for the free safety network at SportMedBC.com. The webinar will be posted in the network within the next 48 hours. Seb mentioned how to connect with him, his website, his email, sebh@sportmedbc.com. You can check out our social media channels as well. We're on Facebook and Twitter, facebook.com/sportmedbc, and our Twitter handle @sportmedbc. Our next webinar, we do have another one. That's next month, March the 27th, and that will be on nutrition for athletes. Another key issue really when it comes to young athletes, to people who are active within teams, within their community, how to keep fit, how to stay healthy. Nutrition for athletes, March the 27th of 2013. So that's in 1 month's time. And be sure to check back for more information and updates throughout our website and our various social media channels, as I mentioned, on Facebook and on Twitter. For Seb Hartell, I'm Mike Martinego. Thanks again for checking out the SportSmart webinar.